Serling.
How are you folks? Glad to have you with us tonight. Very briefly, what we're going to do is I'm going to talk for a few minutes. I have to go back there to use the laptop to change the pictures for you. You're going to see a lot of personal photos from Carol Serling since Rod had passed, of Rod growing up in Binghamton, some in the war, right through the last photo, professional photos of him 3 weeks before he passed away. And that's a very unusual photo, you'll see why. And we'll do a Q&A briefly after that. Now we do have an extra audience with us. Martin Rams is broadcasting this live over Facebook as we speak. So we might even get questions from some Facebook people. There's 40-some signed up already to view it, and that number might go up. So I'm with the Rod Serling Archive at the Bundy Museum of History and Art, which is in Binghamton, New York, Rod Serling's hometown. And the Bundy Museum came into being 10 years ago when a local businessman moved from Ithaca to Binghamton and bought the property as a potential antique shop. And he realized that Rod was from there, and with all the popularity, he says, well, let's get a museum going for Rod Serling. So he called me in because I had been collecting Rod Serling material since I met him twice at Broome Community College in 1971. We talked for 20 minutes in private before he spoke. Wonderful man, and I've been a lifelong fan. So in 1986, Binghamton started what they called the Rod Serling Memorial Committee. And it was Helen Foley, who was Rod's famous English teacher. If you remember the Twilight Zone episode, Nightmare is a Child, it was all about Helen Foley in name, and they also used Helen Foley as the character in Twilight Zone, the movie. So Helen Foley and a group of Rod's former students got together and formed what became, in January of '87, the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation. And I spent 6 months and got them a non-for-profit status. And I was their curator, archivist, and historian for 7 years. Then as my health waned and the Serling family would no longer let even us borrow the prints and stuff to do film festivals, we had done free. And they were we had 800 the first night, first festival in '87, and we repeated it 3 times. And then they would no longer let us have access to any material. So I left the organization in '94, and when Michael Weinstein bought this property and decided for the museum, he put word out for me to come in and see him. Well, I ignored him for a year. I didn't really want to get sucked back into the regular schedule of all this volunteer work, but I did go in and see him. He interviewed me on camera for 4 hours, 3 different occasions, and he says, you got to help me build this up into a nice archive collection. And so I do all the purchasing for the museum, and I use a museum credit card, thank God. And so we have now put together in 10 years almost 3,000 items, a lot of wonderful documents, letters. We have 3 original handwritten letters from Rod Serling that he had sent to his teacher Helen Foley in the 50s and 60s. We have a nice variety of material, and some 16 millimeter and DVD material that no other museum or any place in the world has. Even the Paley Center in New York and LA, UCLA does not have some of the things that we have, so we're very fortunate. And we've had some wonderful people make some wonderful donations to the museum. We are a not-for-profit. Matter of fact, for 5 years we were on a temporary status, but this past April we gained national status for life. They can never be taken away. There's 3 or 4 activities going on at our museum every day. The Rod Serling has always been free and always will be. We have a nice exhibit. We rotate the material every 6 months. And all these in the zone programs, I've done over 37 of them at the museum in 10 years, are always free. And I try and group them into like in the zone, time travel, and time travel revisited I just did, and the war themes, and the boxing themes. So tonight I want to give you a little glimpse of personal photos that we have in the archive, and let you see some of him growing up. I think you'll like seeing some of these things. And then I'll come back up and talk for a few minutes if you have a Q&A. And he had a very amazing career. I mean, you just can't realize the number of scripts that he put out in his short lifespan. Over 252 produced works, not just written works. I'm going to tell you about one of the last scripts he wrote that was never made for the theaters. About 3 weeks before he died, he finished it, and it's going to blow you away. So let me go back and welcome, enjoy the show, and we'll click through. There's about 40, 45 pictures. Then we'll come up and talk for a few minutes. Then we're going to show you 3 unusual films. Rod was still in college in 1950 at Antioch College. He graduated in 50. But the first thing he ever had aired on television, we're going to show you tonight, is called Christmas for Sweeney. And it's a cute, schmaltzy Christmas show. Just remember, it's 1950. As a matter of fact, when I found the print at one of our film conventions, back around 78, Carol Serling says, well, I don't remember Rod writing that. And I said, well, I'll send it to you. And she says, oh, this is so bad, don't you dare show it. And I says, you can't tell me what I'm going to show. And I showed it at a festival many times, and the people love it because it's early vintage Serling that you don't find anywhere. The next piece I'm going to show you is from a show in the mid-60s that Christopher's put out called Crossroads, and it was always religious dramas. Well, this is a very heavy, heavy Serling piece about bigotry and hatred with the Nazis and the Jewish people. And it's going to blow you away. It's called Insight. And I was lucky because in '87 I called the company that made them, and he says, we got the negatives, you'll pay. So they charged us $270 and struck us a brand new print off the negatives. So it's a real rarity. Although it's out on video and some DVD, some people are cranking it out, someone gets a hold of it. And then the last thing is just a 10-minute promo from the Night Gallery that's not even on the DVD box set. So you'll get a little variety of some of the different things he wrote, but I'll touch briefly when we talk after the pictures on a little bit of his war career. He was a war hero, not just in the war. And a little bit about censorship and some of the things that he wrote that have not been produced but are in the works right now. So thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy the program. I don't know how this turns off. Okay, this is the earliest photo that we have of Rod. This is he was born, of course, Christmas Day, 1924, in Syracuse, New York. He had a quote he used all his life, that I was the Christmas gift delivered unwrapped. He always got a kick out of that. When he was about a week after his first birthday, the family moved to Binghamton, New York. They moved to Binghamton for one reason. His mother, Esther Serling, she was born in Russia, and Father Samuel was born in Detroit. Her family, the Cooper family, owned a store of grocery chains from Auburn, New York, to Syracuse, to Rochester, and they wanted to expand and open up in Binghamton. So I've tracked down through city directories, even though Rod wasn't born until Christmas of '24, they actually moved the parents, before Rod was born, to Binghamton. Again in '21 at the Arlington Hotel, which is important to the Night Gallery series. And finally, about 5 days after Rod was born, his father moved alone to Binghamton and opened up the first Cooper Market right on Court Street. And within 2 months, it became the Serling Sanitary Market. This is a great picture of Rod circa 1932 on a motorcycle. It's an actual motorbike. And his father, with the wholesale butcher, wanted deliveries, and Rod used this. And his older brother Robert told me once in an interview, Robert's 9 years older, that Rod Serling had such a personality and smile and stuff that he would make more money off tips than his father would make off the meats. He was just very flirtatious. In his picture with his father on the left, Samuel, and his mother, Esther, and that's the bull terrier, and I even tracked down the dog's name was Tony. They had a lot of dogs, they had cats, they had pet rats, they had a lot of pets. Here's him with his older brother, and again, I'm not sure it's the same dog, I can't see from here. And there's 3 or 4 pictures here, some of them say at the bottom, and I can't see, look back and forth. This is, there's one coming up right away at the Boy Scout troop, and another lodge. That might say Boy Scout troop or West Junior High, where he went to school, front and center at the desk. I think this is the Boy Scout troop, Troop 36. This photo from 1940, you can see Rod Serling was 5'4", and I thought he was short. Well, the young man on the right, Richard Akel, look how much shorter he is. And Dick Akel is still alive, and I've talked to him a few times. He's supposed to come in and meet me at the museum and give me some more information. And the gentleman to the left was Jack Levine, who later became a big surgeon in Binghamton. And the girl in the middle was Dorothy Levine from Syracuse. And Rod Serling had ran into problems. His first problems with bigotry and things like that was in high school, because Rod dated every girl in high school. And had anything to do with Rod because he was Jewish and dating non-Jewish girls. Well, this Dorothy Levine, a couple of the boys would drive to Syracuse one week for dates and the Strand the next week for dates, and this young girl passed away about a week after this photo. I don't know what happened. I haven't been able to track it down. This is when he was on the Panorama, was the school newspaper and yearbook. Rod Serling, after a year, became the editor. It's interesting. It looks like a smoke-filled room to me, even in school. And here we go. Rod graduated January 15th of 1943, and the very next morning at 8 o'clock, right in center, him and 4 friends went and joined the Army. As editor of the paper every week, he was writing articles on do your part for the war, whether you support it, however you can financially, or get drafted or go. And, he's even bugging his teachers to really get involved with the war. Of course, he wanted to go to Europe to fight against the Nazi Party, but he ended up being shipped out to the Philippines. And but that's him in basic training, so that's in 43. Buttons here. Uh-oh, for some reason my thing froze. I hit a wrong button because I can't see. Does anyone have a flashlight, or we don't need the lights or anything? Bear with me just a second, sorry. We brought a laser pointer thing to click it, and it's not working. So I have to do it by hand, and I think I just hit a wrong button. Go in here. There we go. Thank you. I'll keep my finger on the button. This is the last photo, the last time Rod Serling saw his father. It was in 1944, right before he shipped out. And right near the end of the war, his father passed away of a heart attack suddenly. And Rod was devastated. He was very close to his family. He had tons of letters handwritten back and forth between his father, his mother, and himself in the military. And thank God that Ann Serling, the youngest daughter, still has all those original letters. And they're very touching. But he was devastated. The war was over. He was now in Japan. They still would not let him come home for the funeral, which is customary. Even today, they don't, allow that. And here he is in Japan. There was an interesting caption written in Rod's handwriting on the back that says, what the hell am I doing here, and why am I here? And then this one was taken the same day. It was in November of 40, I think it was 45. And the military police, and they were called the Capitati, and in his writing he put in parentheses, Jap police, which I know isn't politically correct. And then he wrote, the guy on my right wants a reward. I can't date this photo. I actually snagged this off the internet about a week ago. And so I'm thinking it was out while he was out in Ohio at Antioch. It's not the greatest photo, but it's a nice one. Can anybody ID the year of the car? That might help us.
Brendan might.
I'm not a car buff. All right, here he is. He went to Antioch College, because that's where Robert had gone. And he was given his free college through the GI Bill and disability as well. And that's where he met his wife, Carol Kramer. and they were married July 31st of 49. But here they were in the radio room. Now, Rod Serling first went there to become a gym teacher, gymnastics and teaching, things like that. And he soon got into the Theater Guild and started doing radio. Well, within a year, he ran the radio station completely. A matter of fact, every week, not only did he write the radio broadcast, he produced it, he directed it, he did all the music for it, he did everything. And he did a show a week for the whole year of 48 to 49. So that's the earliest photo we have of him and Carol Serling together at that point. This photo is dated 1960, Indiana. Must have been a trip, I don't know. Or 1950, excuse me, yes. Can't tell too much about it other than that. And this is, they moved after he graduated to Cincinnati, and he worked at WLW radio and television station out there. And he had submitted 42 different television strips between 1949 and 52, and they were all rejected, other than the one that you're going to see tonight from 1950. The reason that got picked up is somehow the actor from King Kong, Bruce Cabot, got wind of this strip, and he bought it from Rod for $50. And he wrote Rod Serling a check, and one of his buddies that lived across the hall, the family said, come in, and he showed him the check. He says, you're going to cash it or keep it for the autograph? He says, you can walk to the bank with me in the morning. So that's how it happened. Finally, he broke through in 52, and he wrote like 28 strips for a local series broadcast live called The Storm. But here he is with daughters Ann and Jody. And this is the first of his boats on Cayuga Lake. Carol Serling's family, the grandparents, had a cottage out there that they kept expanding to in Cayuga Lake, in Interlake in New York, outside of Ithaca. And so this was named after his daughter, Jo-Nan, N-A-N. He called her Nan instead of Jody. And here again, another picture we can't get an exact year on, but I think it fits right in the same era. And I love the face he made on this one. This was on another boat called the Carolyn II, so after his wife. This is about 1958 when they came to Binghamton for a high school reunion. Here they are in 59 on their way to the Emmys. By this point, Rod Serling had won 3 Emmys already. His first Emmy was 1955 for Craft Theater Patterns. His second Emmy was 1956 for Requiem for a Heavyweight, the classic boxing program with Jack Palance, Ed and Keenan Wynn. And then again in 58 or 9, he won for his adaptation of The Comedian that was written for Mickey Rooney. This is in Binghamton in 1959. He was brought in to crown the beauty queen for the dedication of her rebuilt airport. Another shot on a boat, at least more pleasant smile. He must have had a more fun time than the last photo. Here he is, I always say trying to water ski like he fell, but he was probably just getting ready to get up on the skis. Very athletic. He was into a lot of sports. He was almost a professional tennis player and ping pong player. He tried out for the football team. He was too short. Played a little baseball in school, and he won a letter in track. Now here's his teacher, Helen Foley. Rod popped in 1961 and visited her and the students in the classroom. We have several photos, but I just put one up there. And here again, about the same era, 62, is Rod with the 2 daughters. I love this shot. I just found this one for the first time on the internet recently, of Twilight Zone days pulling into MGM, where the Twilight Zone for film. It's just a wonderful shot looking back at us. Here's Binghamton Airport getting off the plane, where some people spotted him. He signed autographs. He loved recognition. He loved signing autographs. And here's a year or two later, probably leaving L.A. And when they flew into Binghamton, they only missed 2 summers when each of the girls were born. Otherwise, they spent all of their summers in Ithaca area, Interlake, and in the cottage. One of the stories was so funny in Ann Serling's book, if you're not familiar. It came out about 3 years ago. My Dad, as I knew him, Rod Serling. And she told how they had pet rats. And the girl says, well, you're not just bringing the dogs, you're bringing the rats. So on the airplane, one of the rats got out of the cage, and nobody knew it. And Rod's on his hands and knees going up and down the aisles, and nobody knew what he was doing. And finally, when he said, I'm looking for my pet rat, they all went nuts. Another shot in Binghamton around 1962 or 3. Ron was interesting. Whenever he was asked by anybody to come to Binghamton and speak for any cause, he did it all at his own expense, always his own expense. So we're very grateful. In 1964, CBS did a special on Rod's paratrooper days, and there's 2 shots of him in uniform recreating his parachute training, parachute jumping. Here's one in the plane. This Rod came into Binghamton November for the Pearl Harbor reunion of local Pearl Harbor people. Now, these are real tiny, but I pulled them because they're from his Ithaca years. He moved back to Ithaca, to Interlaken, and took a professorship in 1965 and taught off and on there and at Cornell until his death in 75. And there's just 3 shots, small ones of him, and a couple with students. I'm hoping we can track him down through Ithaca College and maybe get some prints. But these are things I had never seen in 40-some years of doing my research. Here he is in 1968, Binghamton High School. He was the commencement speaker. We have a transcript from the speech, and he was very outspoken about all war because of the horrors of war he went through, but he was especially vehement against Vietnam, and even in the transcript, the last pages, talking about whether you're for it, against it, whatever, do your part, and you do what your mind tells you need to do. Here he is when I met him in 1971, Broome Community College, now called SUNY Broome, and I caught him on the steps of the library at 20 to 7 in the morning. He come walking up, and they weren't open till 7, so I said, Mr. Serling, they're not open yet. And he stood there the 20 minutes on the steps and talked with me, and it was interesting because I didn't pay any attention to how short he was from television, but being so short, and I was sitting like on the 3rd step, he walked up 2 steps so that we were eye to eye. He did not like to be looked down upon. And he had his usual suit, his hands clasped in, front of his waist, just like in the Twilight Zone, other than when there was a cigarette in his hand, which was quite often. He smoked 5 packs a day, and that, I'm sure helped to shorten his life. I have to look up the yearbook for this girl that's to his left, because I directed and starred in Arms of the Man, George Bernard Shaw, and she was in there, and there was a scene where I was supposed to, rough her up a little bit. Well, I threw her too hard, and she went across the stage and broke her arm. But she said it was worth it. I got an A for it. But he loved just sitting and visiting with the people. This was in the cafeteria. He did speak on the war, and the next couple are from, this is an interesting one from later in May of 71. You can't see in the background, but Johnny Hart, the cartoonist from BC and The Wizard of Id, is to Rod's left, and then his partner, Johnny Hart's partner, Brant Parker, who did The Wizard of Id. So that was the 3 of them. They were buddies. And Johnny Hart just passed away not too many years ago of a heart attack while doing the comic strip. And what's interesting is his partner, Brant Parker, died 7 days later of a heart attack. Now these are 73 of Rod. We had a lot of shots. I just put one in. So many of them had his, fingers to his nose or his fingers to his cheek and stuff. They're just some cute poses. And here's the last speaking engagement in 73 at Broome Community College. And he came in, I have a recording of Helen Foley, and said, you're going to this is an anti-war rally, and I want you there. And so the whole speech was nothing about anti-Vietnam. And I've talked to a lot of people that were there. This is the last photo I was telling you about, taken in the end of May, and he died June 28th. And 3 of them, it listed the name of the professional photographer in the back. It was his at his cottage right before the second heart attack. And that for 6 months, and everybody would lean and say, he's smoking a joint. It was really funny, but I took it down. But because he was asked about 1970 if he'd ever smoked marijuana or used drugs, and he said, no, I haven't. But he said it hasn't yet been proved whether marijuana is harmful to the body in any way. And he was in such pain from the heart attacks. I don't criticize anybody for having smoked if that's what they wanted to do. But we get a kick. We have the original photographs from the person that took them. Now, I mentioned the Cooper Meat Market. This is when his father Sam opened the first store on Court Street in Binghamton. It's now a bar and pub, quite a nice place, and we send people there on our tour map. And you can see Serling Sanitary Market. And it's interesting, this is a Christmas flyer, and being Jewish, the father really catered to the Christmas crowd. It's all about Christmas specials and different things. This is an interesting piece. In the high school in 1943, before graduation, Rod Serling painted his name in white paint in the year 1943, and the girl JoJo Handy, who's since passed. Excuse me. When they tore down some of the stage there, they threw this in the garbage. And the gentleman holding it, I wish it showed him, he was one of the people responsible for getting the Serling Foundation going. His name was Jules Levitt. He tracked down where this ended up, and he paid the guy $100 for it and donated it back to the high school. So it's on display in Binghamton High School right now. And Jules passed away a year ago, but he was a big part of the Serling Foundation. We're very fortunate to have, this is from Requiem for a Heavyweight, and these are the artist set design sketches. We have all 10 that storyboards the entire Requiem for a Heavyweight. It's the only set in the world, we're told. And this is the opening scene. You can even see the boxing and wrestling posters on the wall. So when I first got this set of 10 in, I watched it with the play, and they just go back and forth and do cover the whole storyboard. We also have the 4-foot square from the ceiling, bird's eye of the whole sets for Requiem, even the outside sets. Rod Serling always wanted to be an actor. He did do a Jack Benny show. He did do in 1962, Robert Sterling starred in a sitcom, Ichabod and Me, and Rod played the celebrity writer next door. And this is the last thing he acted in was Ironside, season 9, called Bubble, Bubble, Toil, and Murder, where he played a warlock selling witch's brews. Only about a 3-minute part. This is one of the buttons I made. He had his famous quote, "Everybody has to have his hometown, Binghamton's mine." And I made those for the first film festival we did in '87. And here we have Martin Graham's amazing book, the definitive book on the Twilight Zone, over 800 pages. I think it's about 5 years now. Martin sold out in here, but if you don't have it, it's a must-buy. You can order from him or from Amazon. And it's just a wealth of information. I've even learned some things when the book came out that I had not known yet. He did impeccable research. And here's a picture of Martin. I wanted to put him up. He's the one filming this for Facebook as we speak. So that's it for the film presentation. I'll come back up front now. Sorry, it takes me so long to get around anymore. Oh, okay. I want to talk briefly on his war years. Rod Serling took up boxing as soon as he got, even before he left the country. And he won his first 18 bouts by a knockout. So for a short guy, he was strong and he was fast. Then all of a sudden in the next fight, going for a championship, he got knocked out in the 3rd round with a broken nose. So that's the end of my boxing career. However, a few months later, he did try out again and lost and said that's it. But so he had a fascination with writing. And of course, the famous Requiem for a Heavyweight story actually started with his writing a short story, a 15-minute film in 1949 while still a student. And then he did some early films for that the Storm series in '52 that were boxing. And then Requiem was written specifically for Playhouse 90 as a request. When Playhouse 90 started, the very first show was supposed to be Rod Serling's Requiem for a Heavyweight. But the executives got busy and said, well, all our wives are saying not to let you run it because the women don't want to watch boxing. So they preempted with another Playhouse 90 the Forbidden Zone that Rod Serling had written, and that was supposed to be later. So that's what actually aired first. And that's just an amazing war piece, too. So anyways, Requiem went on, and it's the only time in history that William Paley from CBS, when that show went off the air, called the set and said, you have just put television ahead by 10 years. He said, this is the most phenomenal thing that will probably ever air on live television. And it was, and of course, he won the Emmy again for that. But in the war, after the boxing, when he got over into the Battle of Leyte and Guam and in the Philippines, Rod Serling, some of his sergeants, and said he was so cocky, he would never clean his gun. He'd always be off wandering. They'd have to send people out into detriment to find him. So they put him in the demolition hell squad. And they had to go with machetes through the jungles and stuff. And one of the first times he was out, he came through this clearing, and about 20 yards in front of him was a Japanese soldier poised ready to shoot and kill Rod. Because of his short stature, a buddy of his behind him put his rifle on Rod's shoulder and took out the enemy. But Rod wouldn't have even survived that first day. Then a tragedy happened right after that. They were in a battle for 30 days. They had no food. They were in the bunkers. They were being heavily bombed. And shortly in, some helicopters came and were going to drop crates of food down to them. And one of his friends jumped out of the hole. They were starving. He says, well, send a rabbi down with the boxes of food and everything. And he was so excited. And the helicopters had to get out quick because they were being shelled now. And the ropes broke. And the crate fell on the guy and beheaded him. Killed him instantly. So Rod was really traumatized. He and a few buddies buried him. They made a Star of David out of some twigs. And his name was Mark Levy, which is in the Twilight Zone episode. He used five of his dear friends he saw killed, and in one episode alone he lists them all: Morgan, Martin, Horton, Levy, and he did a tribute to his friends that he had lost in the war. And so Rod was wounded with shrapnel twice, his knees and his one eye, and he spent a month in rehab in Manila. And that's where he said he took up writing as a form of therapy. So even in high school, Helen Foley said he wasn't a good writer, but he was a good speaker, so she pushed him into theater and into the debate club. So now here he is starting some writing, and he came out, and they were sent to do some cleanup in Manila, and there was like 17,000 soldiers versus 100 of our troops that parachuted in, and it took them 30-some days to get into town. But when they got into town, the people were so excited, they put on a little play out a musical and a play and stuff in their honor for the soldiers. Well, all of a sudden, a young girl's up there singing and dancing, 14, 15 years old, and they started to be attacked. And Rod went up on stage, jumped her, dragged her down, and got her to safety. So he was literally a war hero and won several awards. But he was so traumatized. In Anne Serling's book, you'll read where a lot of times at the home, he'd fall down the steps, his knees would go out from the wounds, and he was in a lot of pain. But, so he hated the war vehemently. One of the first things he wrote after the war, and nobody knew this existed till about 2 years ago, it was found in the Serling archives in Madison, Wisconsin. They had approached Rod in the 60s to donate stuff, and he donated 80 boxes of original letters and transcripts. In there is a 38-page handwritten letter to my children, and to any of my children in the future. I want you to read this and learn the horrors of war from me. And it was called First Squad, First Platoon, and it went into detail about his 5 buddies and their deaths and all the horrors that Rod went through. The Serling family did not even know this existed, and they've since been given a copy. And we're getting a copy of the transcript really soon, so we're looking forward to having that in our possession. But he said, if I have any children, I want them to hear about it from me. And the guy that saved his life shooting over his shoulder, he and Rod made a pact on Christmas Day that year that if we're alive in 50 years, we're going to meet at my cottage in Interlaken. And of course, Rod wasn't, but the guy kept that promise and came and spent the day with Anne Serling and the daughters. And they read the letters and reminisced, and I thought that was a wonderful touch to have remembered that pact that they had made. So, Rod Serling went on with the professorship. One thing that we've read in a lot of letters and things is the students loved Rod, and they'd tear him apart. He'd teach a film course, and he'd show something he wrote, and he said they'd rip me a new one. He said, they really tore into it and were really good judges and critics and things. And he would have 4 or 5 out to the home almost every day out to the cottage and just do the same thing, visiting and talking. So he was really well liked by all the students at Ithaca. And You know, at that point, he wanted to really become a major screenwriter for the theaters, not just television. He had a burning ambition to be a famous screenwriter, and he never achieved that. Even though he did the adaptations for 7 Days in May, and he wrote The Man about the first black president, and things he never achieved. He never had that big hit enough to really push him over. And of course, Patterns was done in '55 as a movie, and Requiem in '56 became a movie with Mickey Rooney and Anthony Quinn in '62. But even that didn't do the business and things like the TV live productions did. I thought they were a lot weaker. So, you know, we have all of these things. We show them often. I do a program in the zone every few months right now. And so how many here, by show of hands, are familiar with Rod Serling's series that follow the Twilight Zone called The Loner, Civil War Western? Any of you familiar with it? Well, it's no wonder, because he proposed it to CBS in '63 when he knew Twilight Zone was going to be on its way out soon. It's a 1-hour Western. And they said no, but when he was on Hong Kong on business, they called him and said, we want to do The Loner, it's a half-hour Western. And so he flew back, and they started production. Well, he hired a good friend of mine, Lloyd Bridges, who was one of my best friends, and he hired Lloyd to star as the main character of the Loner series. So it ended with the last hour of the Civil War, and the Lloyd Bridges, you know, runs through a 14-year-old kid and kills him, and then the war is ended. And he says, well, if it was 10 minutes ago, you know, it would be, now it would be murdered like 10 minutes later. So it haunted him so bad, he's now searching the country to find himself. Well, CBS thought they hired a shoot-'em-up Western, but of course that's not what Rod ever presented or intended to do. So the stories are amazing. Some of them were really critically acclaimed, and they shot 13 and filmed them. And they came to Rod Serling and said, you've got to start writing more action and violence for us. We need more shoot-'em-ups. And he says, you want more of that? Write it yourself. Although he said, write the damn thing yourself. So he started slowing down, and the producer started writing a few. And the box set was just released on DVD 2 months ago. Now, they've been very rare, and I've had some on film since 1977. And I had 22 of the 26 that were finally filmed. It was canceled after the second set of 13, so instead of 39, there's 26 episodes. Well, what's interesting about the series is of the 4 that I was missing to this box set, 1 was written by Rod called The Sheriff of Fetterman's County. Now, Rod Serling was not good writing a comedy. He had done a live show, a baseball episode live in '52 or '3 that absolutely bombed. Well, what's interesting about the series is of the 4 that I was missing to this box set, 1 was written by Rod called The Sheriff of Fetterman's County. Now, Rod Serling was not good writing a comedy. He had done a live show, a baseball episode live in '52 or '3 that absolutely bombed. And he says, I'll never write for live television and comedy again. And of course, you jump to the Twilight Zone, you had the Carol Burnett episode, you had the Andy Devine episode. So you had a few comedy episodes, and again, they just weren't up to par. What I didn't know is this Missing Loner was one of the best comedy things I've ever seen in my life. How many remember Hello Mudda, Hello Fada? Okay, Alan Sherman. He stars in this as the sheriff. And the music for The Loner, the theme song and several episodes was written by Jerry Goldsmith. High Noon. So there's a 7-minute parody of High Noon at the end of this with Lloyd and Alan Sherman using all the original music. I laughed out loud for an hour and I watched it 3 times back to back. It just struck me so funny. So if, the box set is out there, Walmart carries it. For the first month it was Walmart exclusive only, and now it can be bought on Amazon and on eBay fairly reasonable. If you like Rod Serling works, you must see it. Many of them are like the Twilight Zones. They're dramas. They're totally, not like a Twilight Zone with a twist ending, but heavy dramas. I mean, for one example, the black actor, and his name escapes me, was coming home from the war to see his father, and he saves Lloyd's life, and when they get to town, his father's hanging in the tree. They murdered him the night before. And I'll tell you, powerful stuff. And that received really amazing critical reviews. They just loved it. And so it's a series that's well worth seeing. You can get it for like $18, and I really recommended it. I wanted to show you something tonight. It took me 40-some years to find. It's a 9-minute pilot promo that they said never existed. And I got it out of CBS. And so I have it on DVD, but we decided right now, since we're the only place in the world you can see it, not to show it. And it's not on the box set, and CBS does not have it anymore. So I was thrilled that they didn't find another print and put it up there. But what was unique about it is Rod Serling comes out on the Western set and he says, "My name is Rod Serling, and I'm the reject from the Twilight Zone." And it's just funny. And they did scenes for the pilot and for one other episode, and the cast is totally different other than Lloyd Bridges. And the scenes work differently with different dialogue, and I actually like what's in the 9-minute better than I do what actually aired. But what happened, the reason it was killed after